Welcome to Design to Disrupt, Samsung's podcast where we dive into the big ideas redefining tomorrow's supply chain and procurement landscape. Each episode, bold leaders join us to share fresh insights, real-life stories, and practical tools to keep you ahead. So get ready to think bigger, challenge the status quo, and help lead the future of the business that powers our world.
Ready to disrupt the ordinary and design for the future? Let's dive in. I mentioned bold leaders in the opening, and our guest could be affectionately described that way for sure. Today, I get to sit down with someone who needs no introduction in the procurement space and spend management world, but I'm going to give him one anyway. My guest today is Michael Van Keulen, MVK to almost everyone, a global procurement leader, former CPO, tech evangelist, and one of the most respected voices in our industry. He's led transformation at brand-named organizations, brought a modern digital mindset to how companies think about spend, and then took that experience to the tech side as one of Coupa's most visible evangelists, helping leaders move from slideware to real operational change. Today, Green Cabbage MVK is the Chief Customer Officer, partnering with clients to turn big ideas into real outcomes, using procurement intelligence to align strategy, unlock hard dollar value, and drive measurable, meaningful change. So we're going to tap into all that, the practitioner, the tech evangelist, the strategist, and the storyteller, and maybe have a little bit of fun along the way. So MVK, welcome to the show. It's a privilege to have you on.
Yeah, thank you. And it's a pleasure. First of all, of course, great to see you. And we've been friends for a while, and it's a great honor to be on your show. So thank you.
Thank you.
And that introduction is beautiful, but sounds a little much, but I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
It's the truth. It's the truth. Well, thanks for joining us, man. Really appreciate it. So I'm going to start off real quick and show you, just where we go, but take us wherever you lead us. I know you've worn a lot of hats. We kind of described that in the opening: CPO, evangelist, transformation leader, speaker. But when someone outside of the procurement organization, you're sitting on the plane, hopefully in first class, and they ask, so what do you actually do? How do you answer that in human language?
Yeah, look, my background is finance and accounting, and I transitioned into this procurement profession because I really wanted to have a much bigger impact in how businesses perform. And as a finance individual, it's kind of hard because you're often reporting and you're often just more concerned about compliance and control and SOX and those types of things. And I felt like in procurement, you're right at the heart of decision making and driving real impact. So when someone would ask me, hey, what do you do all day? Then I always say, well, I really try to optimize the spend that companies have and make sure that they support the strategic objectives of the companies that we support. And that, I think, is in a nutshell what procurement is all about. How do we optimize the resources that we have? How do we make sure we've got the right suppliers that help us scale and grow, drive innovation, and really support the objectives that we set as a company, and ultimately, of course, optimize shareholder value and return on capital. And that's really what I believe procurement is, and that's how I would reply to that.
Absolutely. Good answer. You've been in some big brands, and these are brands that people love, and they may not even know under things like VF, of course, Lululemon, but VF Corp, still has some of the greatest brands out there, North Face, who I'm very familiar with. And that's a multi-brand. So you've got multiple brands under the VF tag. You've been at single brands like Lulu. When you look back, and no pun intended on the thread, but what's the common thread in the transformations that you've been most proud of in those organizations?
Yeah, that in both of those companies, as great as the brands are, even today, and also VF with not just North Face but Timberland, and at the time when I was there, we had Lee and Wrangler and Nautica and Eastpak and Kipling and Reef and all these fabulous brands. Is that most companies have the tendency to mostly focus on the top line. How do I have the right product that resonates with the right consumer at the right time? And then try to scale and grow that, and having great guest experience, as we called it at Lululemon, and make sure that they come into the store, and that's where Lulu is absolutely best in class, is making sure that guest gets the right level of service and that you got the right product that solves a real need. And even sometimes they didn't know they had the problem until they walked into the store and realized that they really had the ABC pants is the perfect example for me as a male, where you're like, wow, I've always been wanting that product and now it's finally there. what then often happens is that you forget that there is a whole lot of other stuff happening in the company before you get to OPINC and earnings per share. And that's often the indirect spend. That could be as simple as a shopping bag. But how do you get your product to the store? What logistics provider do you use? What rates do you pay? You want next day delivery? Well, what's the cost of that? And how do you negotiate those contracts with FedEx and UPS as an example? Or, what fixtures do you need in your stores? What mannequins? What kind of other collateral you need to run your business, IT, your tech stack, and all of those things. And what I noticed at both of those companies is that there wasn't necessarily an emphasis on that. It wasn't like, again, the product great and no sales, you don't need procurement, obviously, but there's a lot of stuff that was happening in both of those companies where, we were maybe not having the right level of transparency. Maybe we had a supplier and then we tripled in size and that supplier was no longer at the right scale. We maybe were not always leveraging our spend. At VF, we had 12 different suppliers for shopping bags. And how do you standardize that? And how do you leverage the volume without adding risk to your supply chain, right? And that's really what procurement brought at both of those companies. But I even saw that at Coupa with all of our customers where the CPOs were all, being tasked with how do you bring your EPS up? And I always say a dollar saved is way more impactful than a dollar earned, right? It flows straight to the bottom line. And really then started to translate that into metrics that are meaningful to executives, which what I always did is, and I highly encourage everybody to do that, is to translate your metrics, not in saving dollars, but in how much sales do we need to generate to achieve the same amount of operating income and EPS. And if you translate it in that way, then all of a sudden people are like, oh, that's very interesting. So at Lululemon, I translated it into black stretchy yoga pants, and or not we as a function. And again, it just unlocked so much resource and efficiency that allowed us to just accelerate growth. And that's ultimately what we want.
Interesting. And by the way, I bought my first pair of ABC shorts based upon our conversation at Manifest a few weeks ago. I had my wife go online the other day. She used her Sweat Collective and discount, and I got my first pair of ABC shorts the other day, which I have on right now. So thank you.
My shirt is Lulu.
There you go.
Yeah, so it's great product.
You stick with the brands you love, without a doubt. We've talked a lot about in the past closing the gap between procurement, supply chain, even risk these days. But for tech execs, for some of the operators listening, what does great actually look like when you truly integrate those two areas and they don't just sit on the same org chart?
Yeah. Look, we are today, in the business of supplying our customers with procurement intelligence. And basically what that means is how do we optimize our contracts, especially in the age of AI, where, everyone is talking about AI, everyone is talking about generative AI. How can I automate? How can I do more with less? And often that requires technology. And what we're really here to do is to say, look, you want to make sure that you optimize your contracts. And the way to do that is by education and by making sure you got the right level of intelligence that allows you to optimize the spend, whether that's pricing at the SKU level or whether that's the right terms and conditions, which are equally important. And I think that what we have to do from a procurement perspective, when you think about procurement and technology, I'm not talking about procurement tech. Yeah, I'm talking about software and tech that you require to run your operation, is to bring those two things together, really understanding what the IT organization needs and requires. And then procurement should support that by providing the right market intelligence, by providing the right contract intelligence, the right commercial intelligence, so that we can optimize that deal. And it's not just about the price. I always say saving money is not my key deliverable in any company. Any CPO that just thinks that saving money is my key objective, I think you're missing the mark. We are here to optimize value, and value is many different things. Pricing is an element of that, but it's also your terms, your clauses, your risk. It could be your impact on invested capital, return on investment. What's the payback? what benefits is it going to drive to the organization. And I think that we, from a procurement perspective, need to bring all those things together, and then as a cross-functional team, make the right decisions that again support our organization and achieve the outcomes that we're after. And I think if you organize it that way and do your homework, I think that we can truly drive a competitive edge, and that's what we want.
You just hit on something that sparked something in my head to ask about is with AI, making the right decisions and being able to do those, you really have to have, structured, governed, trusted, current data. So with Green Cabbage, what does that look like in practice when you're trying to run modern procurement, not just some PowerPoint?
Yeah. Look, we now have over 2,000 customers. We manage $1 trillion in spend on behalf of and support and provide intelligence on across 20,000 suppliers with 1.8 billion data points and leveraging AI. And what we do is, look, if you're in the middle of a negotiation, at some point you provide that contract to us. And then within 24, 48 hours, we will tell you exactly what that contract should look like based upon our data set. We extract the metadata out of that contract. We leverage our data set. We look at similar sized companies, same industry, same geography. And then what we provide back is our output is what we call a meta market intelligence thesis that identifies opportunities where you can optimize the contract. The customer takes that back. The customer goes ahead and executes and uploads the final agreement back into our platform. The other thing that is unique is we're so confident about the value creation that we contractually agree with customers that have a multi-year agreement to a return on their investment. And I think that is the way to do it from a tech perspective as a solution provider is, you want to have skin in the game. And so we have real skin in the game. We want to make sure our customers achieve that ROI. But to your point, in order for the output, that MIT to be relevant, is you need to have structured, governed, controlled, gated data that's relevant and current, and maybe more importantly, is anonymized. So we don't store these contracts per customer. We anonymize, we redact the contract so that there is anonymity. Sometimes our customers redact because we don't need to know who the customer is. We don't need to know the company. Yeah. What we need to know is which industry are you in, where are you geographically located, and what's your size. And we all know from experience, and I've been in retail and I've been in tech, that if you are in the retail industry in North America, you will pay way less for your Oracle subscription than if you're in the financial industry in New York City. It's just industries, it's pricing, it's risk, it's a lot of different factors that are, and it's not just for Oracle. I mean, it's across technology. I'm not picking on Oracle per se, but I'm just saying, so we know that because we have that data. And that's something that, I negotiated in my time as a CPO once every 2 years with Salesforce. Well, we do hundreds and hundreds of Salesforce agreements a month, right? I mean, it's just that's intelligence huge. That I don't have as a CPO. And I don't want to turn it into a sales pitch because that's not the intent, but it's providing that level of intelligence is what ultimately is the unlock and optimizes the value of your spending.
Knowing that sort of level of intelligence is huge during growth phases, and understanding that you led some of those retail companies through some of their largest growth areas. If you had to explain good AI procurement data, besides what you just did, but you had to do it using a Lululemon product, would it really be kind of the ABC pants for data designed to kind of keep everything supported, controlled, and exactly where it should be?
Yeah, what you do with products like that is you do what we call should cost modeling. I mean, I have had the opportunity to work with McKinsey, and this was over a decade ago, where I was introduced to should cost modeling and everything that comes with that, and fact-based decision making, and but that is ultimately is what it is, right? And when you do that with things like software or marketing and advertising or third-party labor, it becomes a little harder to do should cost modeling, right? You're not buying widgets. You're not buying a pair of pants that you can extract all the subcomponents of what makes that pant and now start to understand how much thread goes into those pants and zipper and fabric and labels and poly bag and comes in a cardboard box, and you can kind of strip that all out. Unfortunately, with technology especially, you can't do that, right? Philosophically, technology could be free. The only cost for a software company is hosting me on AWS or GCP or Azure, whatever they use. That's really the only cost. And the only reason why I'm paying for software is because I can create value that I otherwise can't. That's why I'm giving a piece of the value back in terms of subscription. So for software, it's harder to do. That's why it's even more important that you have that intelligence at your fingertips to know what the art of the possible is. But to your point, I know you're being facetious with the ADC pen, but there you can actually do a shoe cost model. Like you can really strip down what goes into that product and then understand what the cost is to manufacture it. No different than how the iPhone comes together and, your LCD TV at your house and whatever. It's subcomponents that ultimately make the cost of the TV. And then you need to understand what's the cost to bring that all together. And that's something you negotiate with your finished garment manufacturer in the apparel case. But really breaking it down to the finite detail, you'll unlock so much value. And it's no different than buying services.
So sticking with that, does that mean Green Cabbage visibility-wise is kind of like the see-through yoga pants from Lulu? Gives you pure visibility?
That was I actually joined shortly after that happened. But yeah, that's probably how you could phrase it if you want to be a bit facetious with Ian. I know you always want to throw something in there that's a bit facetious. That's why we're here. It supposed to be a real conversation. And yeah, that's actually a really interesting way to look at it. Thank you. That was a good one.
Moving on a little bit from that, you said procurement needs a new operating model. I've heard you talk about that before, and that it's, becoming a true value and revenue engine, not just cost cutting, as you talked about a few minutes ago. What are the top 2 or 3 signs that a company is still stuck in that old model versus playing the new game and using things like Green Cabbage to really get ahead of the game?
Yeah, and I think I wouldn't say that anymore, because if you haven't really changed your operating model, I think you're going to be in deep trouble, especially now with AI. And I said this 10 years ago, where I said, look, if we're still in the work of cutting purchase orders and getting contracts to the finish line after my stakeholder, business partner already decided who the supplier is, yeah, that's all very tactical work, right? Like just rubber stamping, I shouldn't say rubber stamping, but at least, just executing a contract without being part of any of the ideation up front and being part of the discussion within the business and understanding, well, what are we trying to achieve? And then ultimately, potentially even start sourcing for a pink elephant, as I've always called it. Mm-hmm. Like if you're in that space and you're mostly just cutting POs and making sure stuff ends up at the right place at the right time, your job is at high risk if it has not already been eliminated today. And AI is only going to accelerate that. And so what I think best-in-class procurement organizations do, if you want to kind of flip the question on its head, is we are part of the moment that companies are ideating. What do we need in order to achieve our objectives? Are you part of budget cycles? Are you part of strategic planning? Is procurement providing input into those processes that are happening at every company? Where are we going to be in 5 years from now? Do we got the right suppliers? What do we know about our suppliers? What do we know about the ownership of our suppliers? What do we know about what do we know about the suppliers of their suppliers and their suppliers, like tier 2, tier 3? Like if we really start to think about that, then I think you're at the heart of driving competitive edge and driving innovation in your company. And then I think you are in level 3, level 4 procurement. I don't think that will ever go away. If you're in level 1 and 2, so mostly tactical, transactional, running RFPs, running sourcing events, doing some analytics and presenting that to a set of stakeholders. I mean, I was doing stuff the other day on ChatGPT, and it took me 5 minutes, what would have otherwise taken me 5 days. And I know that ChatGPT already, some people feel so old school, because I had a guy talk to me about Notebook LM, and so cool. And I don't even, I'm having a hard, and I'm in technology and I should know all this stuff. My point being is like, it's going so fast right now. But if you are in that level 3, level 4 in supply chain excellence and making sure that you've got the right risk in your supply chain and you've got the fallback plans and you know what the cost drivers are. I mean, oil is hovering around $100. We should know immediately what it means for our supply chain, which components of what I'm sourcing, which is a lot, whether it's plastic, whether it needs to be on a container, whether it needs to be on a plane, on a truckload or LTL or small parcel. All of those elements are going to be influenced by the oil price. I mean, it's not rocket science, right? And you need to understand, like, okay, well, what is that going to do with my suppliers? And I need to talk to my suppliers about that and have real constructive conversations and not pretend it doesn't exist. And if you're in that space and understand your cost structure and how your company makes money, and if you truly have a real deep understanding of your business, I think procurement is one of the best profession in the world. And I also think that we've got a really, really great future ahead of us.
So on that note, let's say there was a CFO, I'm a CFO stuck in 2010. What can I do in the next 90 days to change the course of where we're going?
What can you do in the next 90 days? Well, the first thing I would ask the CFO is, how many times in a month do you talk to a supplier? How many times? Strategic suppliers. I'm not talking like a Lululemon, we had 10,000 suppliers, or whatever the number was. So I don't really remember, but something around that range. Of course, I didn't know all of that, right? That would be crazy. But how many times do you talk to your top 20, top 30 suppliers that are strategically critical to your business? I'm not talking about your office supplier I'm talking about the companies that are strategically important to your company. And the answer often is never.
Mm-hmm.
And that is shocking. So that would be the first thing that I would ask a CFO. How much of your day and how much of your week and month do you spend with your strategic suppliers that you spend billions and billions of dollars with? So that would be the first thing. Then the second thing I would say is, where does the CPO report into in your company? And in some cases, companies don't even have the CPO or a head of procurement. It's some director of procurement somewhere reporting to accounting or FP&A, or I think that is a miss. Like, you're going to miss out on so much value creation that this person, he or her, can bring to your organization if you were to simply just open up and ask the right questions. When I was at VF, it's a true story, in Europe, I asked my CFO, how much do you think we spent on, pick a category. I think I picked company cars, which is quite common in Europe. How much do you think we spend on company cars a year? And it took him, and I'm not going to say who it is, but if he hears this, he knows it's him. He's one of the best CFOs I've ever had the pleasure of working for and with, but he just didn't know. And it's because finance and CFOs look at spend very, very differently than procurement. I don't care that we spend $100 million in office supplies. I need to know, what are we buying, who we're buying it from, how much are we paying for it, and can we extract more value out of the spend? And finance things are differently. They think about spend more as, which GL account do I need to book it? Is it CapEx? Is it OpEx? Is it SG&A, or if it's in the margin? And I want to make sure that I book it at the right GL account. So when the auditor comes in at the end of the quarter and at the end of the year, that I have a P&L and a balance sheet that is a fair representation of the performance of my company. That's what the CFO cares about. And they care about, SOX and compliance and internal controls and stuff like that, right? I don't really care about any of that. I care. Don't misunderstand, but I don't really care. What I care about is every dollar that leaves the building, are we optimizing that? And how do we optimize that? By all these different things, like I said earlier, I need to know the ownership structure of my suppliers. I need to understand their cyber stance. I need to understand their insurance and their indemnification and the contract and the terms and all these things. And that's my responsibility, right? And so that would be the other thing that I would ask to that CFO is like, well, what do you know about the contract with your suppliers? How do you know that you're not opening up a back door? How do you know that your environment is secure, and what kind of touch points do you have with your procurement team? And often CFOs are like, I don't really know. And that's even still today is not untrue. I think CFOs have started to really raise the bar, and you can see that procurement is now really raising the bar, and which is exciting. But I don't know.
Starting to see it more and more. Absolutely. Kind of circling things around, tying it up. You've been a really big voice in the industry. You clearly love what you do. There's no doubt about that. If you're thinking about your legacy going down the road and procurement was a sport, what would be on the back of your jersey? What's going to be your MVP for MVK on the back of your jersey?
What's going to be in the back of my jersey, if this is a sport? Mm-hmm. First of all, if it is a sport, it probably would have to be either football or baseball, because those are my two favorite sports. So when I talk about football, I'm not talking about that thing that Americans call football with the egg. It's the round ball, right? It's what you call soccer. Right. I hope it would say at the back, relentless.
I love it. I had risk taker in mind. I like relentless. I love it. That's great.
Yeah, risk taker, sometimes uncalculated risk, but look, I love procurement. I've made mistakes along the way, which we can maybe do in a different session. Lots of learnings. I mean, it's not mistakes, right? It's learning opportunities, as we call them. But I'm super grateful to have been in this profession for so long, and I hope I get to do it for another 10, 15, 20 years. I hope along the way that I've said a few things here and there that inspired some people. I hope that that's true. That's for others to comment.
Hey.
Thank you. I appreciate that coming from you, Ian. I really do appreciate that. But I love this profession, and I'm super grateful. The profession has been great to me and my family, and it's given me so much great opportunity. I've met so many great people that, if I get to do that and I can sit on that rocking chair in my 70s or 80s and kind of see the sunset, I hope I look back and say, you know what, I gave back something to this profession that's been so good to me.
You already have. It's first of all, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. I can't say enough about you both as a friend and a mentor. So I appreciate this very much for you taking the time to be on here. I did want to ask, how can people get in touch with you? How can they touch base with Green Cabbage and learn more?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, and so feel free to drop me a LinkedIn invite and drop me a message. I'm typically pretty responsive there. Or drop me a note. It's MVK at green-cabbage.com. I'd love to discuss, and not just what we do, which I think truly is amazing in the age of AI. I think the structured data that we have and the level of value we create for our customers is really, really phenomenal. But I also just love brainstorming and learning from others, and together we just drive better business outcomes. I mean, I've seen that happen over and over again. And we always at Coupa used to say none of us is as smart as all of us, and I think that's very, very true, and it's been true for me. And I always welcome the discussion. But thank you, Ian. I mean, I consider you a good friend, and I look at you as well as a thought leader in the space. And it's been an absolute pleasure for us to do this. I really enjoyed it.
And I remember that at Coupa. It was a great statement, and it really, MVK, it's a pleasure, man. Really appreciate it. You're a great guy, a great mentor to me. And I appreciate everything you've done, not only for me, but for this industry. So thank you so much. And thanks for being on.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.